Welcome everybody to, I don't know which one this is, fourth or fifth in the Culture and Conservation webinar series here at the Nature Conservancy of Hawaii. I'm Sam Ohu Gon, and I will be your narrator and host today. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. So this is a presentation on the Hawaiian cultural significance of our native forest birds. And the Hawaiian title of the thing is Pukakanake ki he o lele, and that's a line out of the Kumulipo. So we're going to dive right in here. When you want to ascertain that a certain plant or animal might have Hawaiian cultural significance, one early question might be, is that plant or animal mentioned in the Kumulipo? As one of the classic pieces of Hawaiian oral tradition, the Kumulipo starts with the creation of the universe out of hot, spinning chaos, to the origins of life in the sea in simple forms such as coral polyps, and building through the generation of life of sea, land, and sky, culminating with the birth of the Hawaiian gods, the creation of human beings, and our familial relationship with everything that came before us. The chant is thousands of lines long out of necessity to tell such a grand evolutionary epic. And one of the interesting features is that birds appear very early in the Kumulipo, in the third wa, or epoch. The major gods Kane and Kanaloa, by comparison, do not appear until wa ewalu, the eighth epoch. Thus, birds are the elders of even the gods, and in Polynesian cultures, as well as many other ancient cultures, the elders are revered, respected, and cared for. Let's look at some of the bird lines out of the Kumulipo. Hanau ka hualua ka makua, pukakanake ki he manu lele. Born is the hualua banana, the parent. Its offspring, a bird, hatches and flies. The first bird hatches naturally from an egg. Hua is the Hawaiian word for egg, but also for fruit. So I love how the wordplay in the first mention of birds in the Kumulipo takes a variety of bananas with hua in its name and uses that egg to hatch the first bird. Because once that first manu exists in the Hawaiian universe, the specific kinds of birds appear in short order. Hanau ka ulili ka makua, pukakanake ki he kole alele. Born is the tattler, the parent. Its offspring, a plover, hatches and flies. Interesting that the first specific birds mentioned in the Kumulipo are ones that arrive from other lands, hinting at the larger context of the world as origin of birds in Hawaii, arriving from places distant and unknown. But eventually the forest birds are accounted for as well. Hanau ka mamo ka makua, pukakanake ki he o lele. Born is the mamo, the parent. Its offspring and o hatches and flies. Thus we get two of the forest birds that provided the most sought after of royal feathers, and it's natural that they would be paired, being intimately linked in the featherwork that features their brilliant plumage. By the time the third va of the Kumulipo is completed, the nene, the io, and the pueo appear, the apapane, the iivi, and the alai appear, the akekeke, the elepaio, and the alawi appear, the moho, the mooli, and the kioea appear, the iwa, the noyo, and the io appear. Acknowledging that birds are culturally important, let's look at aspects of culture where birds are prominent and explore some of these connections by expanding on three major themes. First, an exploration of how from ancient times the deities of the Hawaiian pantheon were associated with specific birds. Secondly, some of the material expressions of Hawaiian culture derived from birds. And finally, the way that native birds, along with many other life forms, form the foundation of Hawaiian traditional knowledge. Each of these topics could take days, so we'll have to skim the surface to give you a taste of the rich universe of cultural context in the Hawaiian natural world. Hawaiian tradition holds that ancestral spirits can take the forms of many different native plants and animals, and these many forms, called kino lau, are physical manifestations of a deity, and thus are held sacred. Let's explore a few of the sacred bird kino lau of the major Hawaiian gods called Akua. The traditional pantheon of Hawaii is dominated by four major akua that together embody all of the elements of the Hawaiian universe. Notice in particular how Ku and Lono divide the year into dry, hot summer and cool, wet winter, and how Kane and Kanaloa each hold sway over land and fresh water versus the ocean, respectively. Their realms of influence in space and time, taken together, cover all the phenomena of land and sea and sky, as well as human behavior. For each of them, a portion of the universe is largely under their jurisdiction. Kanaloa, for example, as god of the sea, is also the god of oceanic voyaging. Kane, as god of fresh water, oversees water-intensive agriculture. Because Ku is god of both governance and the hot summer months, warfare between chiefs was only allowed during the summer. And look, during Lono's wet, cool season, warfare was forbidden, and the fine arts were the focus. But with regard to birds, it's interesting that nearly all forest birds belong to the realm of Ku, while migratory seasonal seabirds align with Lono. Kane, as god of wetlands, also includes wetland birds, but Kanaloa does not seem to be strongly associated with any specific class of birds. You would think that seabirds would fit here, but because Ku is also the major god of fishing, many of the seabirds as guides to fishermen are considered forms of Ku, such as the Manuo Ku here. As Ku is the god of war, governance, and leadership, we find that, as in many cultures, raptors such as Io, our endangered Hawaiian hawk, are embodiments of the fierceness of Ku. Likewise, our Hawaiian owl, Pueo, can be the kino of an ancestral guardian of warriors, Ku Kawakahi. Ku is also the god of bird catchers because of their close association with forest birds. It is the relationship between Ku as god of forest trees, forest birds, and featherwork that link the ruling ali'i to the god of leadership. Lono, in contrast to Ku, is the god of the wet winter season, god of peace and of fertility. The makahiki ceremonies, including games and contests, belong to Lono. So when Captain Cook made first contact with Hawaiians in January of 1778, he arrived in the middle of Lono's Hawaiian winter season of peaceful games, and was witness to the makahiki ceremonies and symbols of Lono's season. Overlooking the boxing contest, for example, was the great staff of Lono, decorated with the white banners and skins of seabirds. And because migratory seabirds arrive in large numbers during the winter in Hawaii, it stands to reason that seabirds such as our Mo'oli albatross are the kino lau of Lono. Kane, as the god of fresh water, is associated with wetland plants and water birds, such as the alai ula, or Hawaiian mud hen. Kane is the god of human concerns and well-being, and the story of how Maui wrested the secret of fire from the alai ula is essentially an expression of how one of the kino of Kane provided for a great enhancement of human existence, albeit not entirely voluntarily. Although Kanaloa is not strongly associated with birds, one forest bird is considered vital to the building of a voyaging canoe. But the elepaio is considered the kino not of Kanaloa, but of the canoe goddess Lea. And when a koa tree is assessed for potential canoe hull, the goddess visits the kahuna kalaiwa'a, the canoe-making specialist, and his entourage in the form of an elepaio, or native flycatcher. If the bird sings and does not peck at the trunk of the tree, it's a ho'ailona, an indication from the goddess that the tree is good. Leaving the kino lau of Akua and Aumakua behind, let's look at some examples of birds in material culture. Just recently, one of the most magnificent cultural treasures of Hawaii was returned from British Commonwealth hands back to the people of Hawaii. The feather cloak and helmet of Kalani Opu'u, who was chief of the island of Hawaii when Captain Cook first came there, was given to Cook by that chief 238 years ago. It's a testament to British care that the hundreds of thousands of bright feathers carefully tied into the cloak and helmet are not only intact, but still bear their original magnificence. The sheer beauty and superb workmanship inherent in Hawaiian featherwork is unexcelled anywhere in the world. Hawaiian featherwork is probably the most obvious expression of the importance of Hawaiian forest birds to Hawaiian culture. The brilliant colors of forest birds directly link the chiefly Ali'i class with the upland realm of the gods, the Wauakua. Those feathers are largely from 4 genera of forest birds. The O'o, genus Moho, and the Mamo, genus Drapanis, provided brilliant yellow and contrasting black. The Iivi, genus Vestiaria, provided the scarlet, while the O'u, genus Siderostra, provided green. It's a sad statement that all but one of these species is extinct today. Iivi are still to be found on several islands, but all populations are declining. The O'u was last seen and heard in 1988. I was among the last to see and hear this bird during the Audubon Christmas bird count that year in the Kilauea Keauhou Forest on Hawaii Island. O'o and Mamo have also not been seen in this century. The last Mamo was seen in 1898 and was likely extinct by the early 1900s. The last O'o was heard in 1987 on Kauai. Some have suggested overexploitation of forest birds for feathers led to their extinction, but there are several reasons why this is not likely. Early naturalists reported species now extinct as, quote, common, unquote, throughout much of the 1800s, but also noted disease epidemics among a wide range of forest bird species in the late 1800s, accompanied by precipitous declines in abundance. By the time avian malaria was introduced in the early 20th century, much of the lowland forests that provided for seasonal foraging areas were completely lost, and between loss of critical habitat and spread of both pox and malaria by mosquitoes, the 1800s and 1900s were marked by extinction of well over half of our forest bird fauna. This was after traditional feather gathering had disappeared as a practice. The other reason that traditional exploitation was not likely the cause of extinction was the restricted, sacred nature of the practice. In the ancient Hawaiian universe, the world was divided into a dichotomy. The realm of people, the Wauakua, occupy the lowlands, where that which grows is the result of human effort. And above this comfortable lowland zone was the Wauakua, the realm of the gods, where human effort had nothing to do with the verdant growth of native forests, and where conditions were often wild and elemental. Indeed, the heavily forested wilds of the Wauakua were considered profoundly sacred and perilous for human incursion. Only small parties led by specialists with knowledge of the forest and its resources could enter the Wauakua, and only with purposeful positive intent and after rigorous ceremonial protocols. The Kiamanu, the bird catcher, was one of the few who could do so, gathering the raw materials from the sacred feathered symbols. Before we leave material culture behind, the delicate bones of birds also found their way into the fine tools, such as needles and awls, as well as specialized instruments for kākau, the Hawaiian word for tattoo. Finally, leaving material culture behind, I want to touch on the role of native bird species in traditional knowledge. In mo'olelo, or traditional stories, birds were sometimes depicted as the caretakers of goddesses. In the story of Laie Kauai, for example, she was cared for by bird attendants that carried her about, and she lived in a house thatched with brilliant feathers. But in the story of Hi'iaka I Kapole o Pele, the forest birds were spies for the mo'o deity of Panaewa, who was the arch enemy of the Pele clan. So just as each of the Akua and Aumakua of Hawaii have their personal attributes, Hawaiian forest birds could likewise be viewed as beneficial or harmful, depending on the circumstances. In the mo'olelo of Kapo'i and the owl Ku Kawakahi, the power of the owl Aumakua to both imperil and rescue offers lessons on obedience to one's gods. Are you folks familiar with the story of Kapo'i and the owl? Thanks to Joseph Poi Poi, who shared this classic story in the Hawaiian newspapers Ku'oko'a in 1865, we have a glimpse of life on Oahu 450 years ago and the recounting of a fantastic supernatural battle, which I'm going to tell you about right now. So in the mid-1600s, during the reign of Kakuhihewa, one of the most famous chiefs of the island of Oahu, an amazing battle occurred in which the heiau of Kupalaha figures prominently. And at the heart of this battle was a man named Kapo'i, who lived in Honolulu near the slopes of Pu'owaina, which is called Punch Bowl today. Kapo'i lived in a place called Kahehuna in the lands of Honolulu long before the arrival of Cook. in the days where there were far fewer people living there and the area was vegetated in dry forests, shrublands, and fields of pili grass. During an errand gathering pili to rethatch his house on the slopes of Pu'awaina, which was then covered with pili grass, he found eggs of a pueo, that's our native owl, in the nest in the grass, and he gathered the eggs with the intent of having them for his dinner when he got home. But while he was preparing the cooking fire in his house, an owl landed on the fence near the entrance of his house and called out, "E kapo'i, e ho maya uhua," that is, "E kapo'i, give me my eggs." Now, if an owl landed outside my front door and asked me to do something, anything actually, I'd probably be inclined to obey. But kapo'i, not kapo'i, instead of saying yes or no, kapo'i inquires, "How many eggs?" It's a test, like the question you ask somebody who, after you announce that you found a lost watch and people come to claim it, you say, "What color is your watch?" But back to kapo'i. "Ehia mauhua," he says, "how many eggs?" "He huahiku," 7 eggs, answered the owl immediately. So now kapo'i knows this is an akua not to be trifled with. But now kapo'i says, "I'm hungry and I want to broil these eggs for my dinner." The owl repeats his command, "E ho maya uhua e kapo'i." Kapo'i tries one last time. "I want to broil these eggs for my dinner." Finally, the pueo tells him, "You are aloha ole, you're heartless, kapo'i, if you do not return my eggs." At that point, kapo'i relents and tells the owl, "Come fetch your eggs." Kapo'i, like all Kanaka of those times, was raised and taught to recognize and obey his aumakua, his family gods, and to know the forms that they would take in the material world to communicate their needs to him. Perhaps a particular shark in its familiar fishing grounds, that would be one example. And he would be sure to care for and see to the needs of his aumakua. But this owl that appeared at his door, it surely was a physical manifestation of a god, since it talked to him. But he certainly did not recognize this new supernatural presence in his life. How would he know if it was benign or perhaps meant ill for him? Perhaps obeying was not what he should do. But being well trained in courtesy to aumakua, kapo'i would not be so foolish as to outright deny the request. Instead, he first assessed the ability of the akua to see and speak the truth by asking how many eggs he had found. And after hearing the correct answer, he made a strategic counter-suggestion, voicing his intentions. But why would one avoid obeying the first command of a strange akua at all? The fact is, if he obeys the akua, he has accepted the akua as his and must therefore obey every subsequent command. Who knows what the new akua might ask of him? How would that change his life? But when the owl scolds kapo'i for being heartless, it's just too much. Humans who deny the gods often come to ill ends. So kapo'i relents, even though he knows he will now have to be obedient to this new owl akua. And sure enough, the pueo orders kapo'i to build a heiau, a large stone temple, and to erect an altar and an offering platform, and to name this new heiau Manu'a. The word means to pile up or accumulate. Kapo'i built the heiau, sanctified it, placed it under kapu, and made proper offerings upon the platform, and after the rites were observed properly, he lifted that kapu. Well, word of this spread, and the high chief Kakuhihewa, king of all of the island of Oahu, was told of Kapo'i's actions while he was at his beach compound in Waikiki. He heard that Kapo'i had built the heiau and conducted the rites, placing kapu on it, making offerings, and lifting the kapu. And at that time, it was a decreed law, if any chief or any person indeed built a heiau, placed kapu upon it, and lifted kapu while the heiau of the ruling chief was under kapu and the rites not yet completed, that was an action of a kipi aiku, a willful rebel, and the punishment was death and sacrifice upon the luakini heiau of the Ali'inui. Therefore, Kapo'i was arrested as a kapu violator, led to Waikiki to the heiau of Kupalaha. He would be sacrificed as a lawbreaker to sanctify the heiau for the season of Ku. So, in other words, it was likely that at the start of summer, 450 years ago, Kapo'i would have been held captive, awaiting his death. But as that day approached, an amazing thing happened. The owls of Hawaii, Lanai, Maui, and Molokai flew to Oahu and gathered at Kalapueo in the vicinity of Makapu'u Point. The owls of Oahu grouped themselves at Kanonea Kapueo in Nu'uanu, and the owls of Kauai and Ni'ihau all gathered at Pueo Hulunui near Moanalua. The day arrived when Kapo'i was to be killed and put on the sacrificial platform. But as dawn broke, the light of the emerging sun was completely blocked by large numbers of owls in the air. The owls flew in and clawed at the faces of Kakuhihewa's warriors, at their eyes and noses, and they defiled the army of Kakuhihewa, showering them with their droppings. To this day, the place where the battle occurred is called Kukai Unahi o Kapueo, the scaly droppings of the owl. The owls were victorious over the men of Kakuhihewa. But Kakuhihewa was not some evil chief. Indeed, his actions to arrest and sacrifice Kapo'i for violation of kapu was his proper duty. To fail to act would itself be a break of kapu, and Kakuhihewa himself would be forfeit in the eyes of his akua. Kakuhihewa recognized from the supernatural battle that Kapo'i had not been willfully disobedient, but only showing obedience to a higher authority. And he told Kapo'i, "You have an akua of great mana." So Kapo'i was spared, rescued from certain death, and mana was conferred on the deified owl, and the owl's name is Ku Kawakahi. So the story of Kapo'i and Ku Kawakahi is one of those that was once very well known, so that if an owl was seen in the sky, the thoughts would immediately go to the luakini and the rescue of Kapo'i from certain death. This may be why, even today, the puea was one of the most well-known and loved of the akua forms of Hawaiian families. Forest birds also figure in oli in the Hawaiian chant. In one of the traditional chants for enlightened leadership, the iyo, the Hawaiian hawk, is immediately evoked as the kino of Ku, god of governance. Ku manue, te alu aku ne kapulea hakalau, ku lia kalani au lia namu ya nau, tane hei luna, tane hei lano, ka akau ka ahema, ku makani ha ikalani, he kili ka aka aikalani, kau ilanu ima ke ha ikalani, pane ikalani e ola ke kanaka. Oh, sorry. Ho mai taloea ka ike ka mana ia e ta honuala o hada wali io ka hiwai hoi da hua o lelo eli ka ume eli a mama wanu. Some of our most beautiful Hawaiian songs use birds to describe the loved one. In the mele that Queen Kapi'olani wrote for Kalakaua, Ipole Manu, beloved wreathed in birds, Kapi'olani thinks on her beloved husband who had embarked on a voyage to San Francisco. He mana'o, te aloha, no ka ipole manu, a thought, a love song for a beloved that is wreathed in birds. In the second verse, she likens Kalakaua to a bird. He manu ku'uho, no homai kanahele. My beloved companion is a bird that resides in the forest. Recalling that the forest is the Wauakua, this statement affirms her husband's sacred nature as king of Hawaii.
Mahe manuku no mai kanahele
In the third verse, she selects the I'ivi as the specific verb. I'ivia ouka, polenaika ua, an I'ivi of the uplands, moistened by the rain. To liken the king to an I'ivi with its royal feathers incorporated into the finest featherwork is easily understood. And to those who enjoy Hawaiian poetry, cold and wet, especially of the uplands and the native forest, is the metaphor for intense love. Thus her story is told of her loved one who has traveled so far away. Ha'ina kapuana no kalani helelo. And as Palanivan said in his rendition of this song, the king never heard her song. He had died in San Francisco. This was her love song for her chief, who went and never returned.
Aina kapuana no kalani helelo Aina kapuana no kalani helelo
So you might by now, get the impression that one of the best ways to praise someone is to compare them to a Hawaiian hawk, symbol of royalty. The olelo no eau, kahaka'io I kamalie, the hawk stands out against the calm sky, describes the standout, a person who impresses far and away above the average. It can also be used to describe a state of being rather like the English aphorism, sitting pretty. Things are going very well and you feel like you're floating on air, like a hawk soaring majestically in the calm. The amakihi is perhaps the most common native forest bird remaining in our lowland mesic forests. Its calls and songs have been part of the Hawaiian consciousness for 1,000 years. However, the call of the amakihi is not very sweet. Instead, it's a buzzy squeak of a call that's not the most pleasant to hear, which explains why there is an olelo no eau, amakihi awa awa, sourpuss amakihi, referring to someone with a negative and criticizing disposition. The elepaio is an ideal signature bird of the lowland mesic forest, greeting human visitors with great curiosity. Such birds were often worked into stories that taught moral or practical lessons, such as the story of an elepaio that wanted to start a war between birds and humans because it had been hit by a stone thrown at him by a man. But what had really happened was that the man was sleeping under a tree with his full water gourd, and the curious elepaio flew down and became fascinated by a blemish on the gourd near the bottom and started to peck at it. He pecked at it and pecked at it. The blemish was a soft spot, and soon he had pecked a hole in the water gourd and nearly all of the water leaked out. The man awoke, saw the bird still pecking at the gourd, and yelled at him. the Elepaio flew to a nearby branch and watched as the man lifted the gourd and found it nearly empty. And now enraged, the man picked up a stone and threw it at the Elepaio, hitting him in the leg. The Elepaio flew off in pain and anger, and he vowed revenge. He went one by one to the different birds, pleading his case, trying to rile them up to join him in his fight. But as each of the birds found out that the Elepaio was the one who had done the first damage, they lost sympathy over his injury and did not believe his war was justified. Nonetheless, in typical Hawaiian fashion, the Iyo, the Pueo, and the Iiwi all listened patiently and told the Elepaio to ho'okolo aku I ka nui manu, to go and ask the other birds. And finally, he told the Amakihi, remember his reputation, who proceeded to noisily deride him with his squawks until the Elepaio finally admitted that he and not the man was the troublemaker. So now that you know a bit more about the great cultural significance of Hawaiian forest birds, I hope you can take pride in the symbol of abundance that was inherent in the amazing featherwork that was manifest in traditional times, view the sacred nature of our forest birds as embodiments of the gods of the Wawakua, appreciate the roles that birds played in our storied places and epic tales, and recognize our birds as cultural treasures as well as amazing expressions of island evolution. And mahalo. Alrighty.
Oh, nice.
Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody. Oh, I'm going to be sorry, aren't I? No, I'm going to unmute everybody. That was pound 5, right?
The leader has unmuted your line.
Aren't getting feedback. Oh, no good. Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody again.
Line.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the chat.
Star 5?
Wait, star 5 or pound 5?
5. Pound 5 is
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there we go.
The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press pound 6.
Okay, so now I've muted everybody and I've unmuted myself, and so we're going to entertain questions, and we're not going to do this everybody unmute when they want to speak. You're going to have to use the chat to send in your questions. So let's see how fast you can type. Meanwhile, anybody in the room who has any questions or comments can do so. Patrick.
The Lono stick had a couple seabirds from what I recall, or
Yeah.
What was it? Do we know the species?
Well, we know that there were probably two different kinds of birds there because there were two sizes. You know, there were big ones and there were small ones. If I go back to it, I think I can. Let's see if this works.
Well, one might have been off the trot.
Right.
Yeah, I think
but
one would be
more
Moji and the other one was probably a shearwater or something. Of some sort.
What I was trying to dig up was Moli or the Blackfoot,
Yeah,
and I never came across an answer to that.
yeah, and that's hard to say too, because it's difficult to figure out what was common then, right? Oh, there we go. So we need Lono. La. Where is Lono? There he is. Okay. So when we were looking at that, you don't get much of a clue, right? You can just see that there's smaller bird and larger bird, right? So the larger bird, in fact, looks like Ledan albatross, at least in this. If you just did a quick look at it and said, what is that? I'd say, a duck. Right? But since we know a duck is
Pretty dangerous.
yeah, but it's not flightless.
Yeah.
It has wings. So my guess is shearwater and albatross, because you can often find them nesting together. So that was a good question.
Oh, I still don't know the answer though.
Yeah.
But no, if there is you or anybody out there that knows like any clues or written or oral evidence of what species of albatross, I'm really interested in that.
I was looking at the descriptions of the Lono figure that you can find in Malo and Kamakau and others, and they're very unspecific.
So would the birds have been white? Because the kapaa is white, yeah?
The kapaa is white.
So if it was like a gray...
But, you know, I see darkness on this one.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not entirely white. Even that one looks like it has dark. So, and then many of the seabirds have a mix of white and black, so it's really difficult to discern that way as well. And they don't mention, they just say skins of birds, skins of seabirds. Yeah. Kaua'e probably not, because Kaua'e would have been year-long, and I think that these would have been migratory. These would have been Lono symbols.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe Kolea, maybe, but these don't look like Kolea to me. I think Kolea would be smaller, especially if one of these are Moli, right?
Right.
Okay, so that was cool. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question about the owl war.
Yeah.
I was reading about an owl war in Manoa it said in the article, between Menehune and owl. Does that relate to the owl war you were talking about?
It probably is one of several different, it builds the reputations of owls, right, as being warlike creatures. That is in Upper Manoa, whereas the Kapo'ian, the owl story, is in Lower Manoa at Waikiki. So whatever, the owls of Manoa had a reputation, they had a rep. In fact, the owls of Manoa were able to call in their pals from all other islands when necessary. You know, if it's just Menehune, they can deal with it themselves. But if it's the chief of the island of Oahu, then they're going to call in help from all other islands,
So
which is kind of neat.
you mentioned, I think it was Pa'apueo over by Makapulu, maybe?
Kalapueo.
Pa'apueo. Where? Do you know where?
If you look on, there are maps that indicate. Yeah.
I'm over there all the time.
Yeah.
And Moanalua too, yeah.
Moanalua, right? Kanone Akapueo, or was it Kahulupueo? I forget. We'll have to look at that. Well, I have the story right here. So so the owls of Kauai and Iha were at Pueo Hulunui near Moanalua. Pueo Hulunui, big feathered pueo. And then Kalapueo is Makapu'u, and Kanone Akapueo is in Nu'uanu. Kanone Akapueo, I think, is below La'imi, which is close to where Queen Emma Summer Palace is, with Makayada. And if you think about it, the habitat of Pueo is more low than the upper valley, right? It would be in lower valley. So I would expect also that the site for Moanalua would not be way up in the back of Moanalua, but be down where it turns drier. Cool. Other questions? I'm going to check that chat now to see whether or not we have... What happened? Oh, there we go. Wow, cool. Okay, wait. This is fun.
Where it is now.
Where's chat? There we go. All right. Wow. What species of birds went extinct prior to the intro of mosquitoes, and any ideas on why? We only have those birds that were in the fossil record only, and those are so few relative to the observations made after contact that it's really difficult to tell exactly why they went out. However, one good reason would be that a lot of them were flightless and big and probably tasty, so they would have been edible and people might have eaten them. And even if kapu were set on them, that kapu would not have been observed by rats that came in, or by pigs or dogs if there were any wandering about in the lowlands. And so many of these birds probably just laid their eggs out in the open with no predators to bother them. And so it's it's quite likely that rats were a big part of the problem. So that was a question sent in by Linda Elliott. And it says here, Aloha Ohu, how do we reconcile the forest birds being kinolau of Ku and at the same time being the messengers for the mo'o panaewa? That's a good question. That's a good question. So you would say, what is the relationship between mo'o and Ku? That's an even harder question. And my answer would be that many kino-lau, many animals and plants that can be kino-lau of a kua are not, what you call? They're not, what do you call it when you have only one person has the rights to something?
Exclusive.
It's not exclusive, exactly. So if you look at Ohia Lehua, for example, that can belong to Pele, that can belong to Laka, that can belong to Ku. And so if you say, well, you know, how come it's to Laka and how come it's also to Ku? It's the same kind of question as you're asking. How can these forest birds be kino of Ku and also be kino of the mo'o panaewa? And the answer being that the form that an akua can take is the kino lau, right? And so at the time that the birds were spying on Hi'iaka and her traveling companions, they were the form of the mo'o panaewa, and maybe it had nothing to do with Ku. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Okay. We will air again tonight about 7 p.m. and again when we stream. Cool. So did you know that this show was being recorded? Was it live on a radio station?
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So thank you for doing that. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a good thing the audience behaved. Okay. From James, are there other examples of feather work using forest birds by Pacific peoples, or is it unique to Hawaii? It is not unique to Hawaii, but Hawaii had it best developed. You can find kiwi in capes of Maoris. You can find forest birds in the feather work of Tahitians. So, and there are seabird feathers used in the clothing and capes of people in Rapa Nui. So featherwork was found across Polynesia, but in Hawaii it was taken to its apex. Okay. Can you jot down the details of the radio station and maybe how to get online? Kaimana?
It's private.
Okay, cool. Any other questions from folks in the room?
I have a question about the future.
About the future?
Yeah, so a lot of birds are endangered.
Yes.
One of the suggestions people are talking about is genetic modification of either the mosquitoes that are one of the major disease vectors or the birds themselves, or even bringing the birds back to life, the extinct birds. And I'm wondering, how does that connect into the cultural significance of them? What are the issues there?
Well, I think that GMO is an issue that we could spend like days talking about, and I think that largely I kind of view sometimes the anti-GMO group in the same way that I view the anti-vaccination folks. So in that both of them will use fear-mongering to get their point across. GMO modification, genetic modification of species, has been undertaken for a long time. First way was via selective breeding. Second way is by cloning of various somatic mutations that you like, and that's the way, in fact, many of the Hawaiian kalo varieties were created, was by recognizing a particular sport that behaved, had different colors, grew better or otherwise, and then you vegetatively reproduce that one, and that becomes a specialty of your place until it's shared with others. So Hawaii has has been like in the forefront in Polynesia of the generation of new genetic forms for centuries. When you bring high tech into it, that's where it becomes scarier, right? And I remember there was a really good website by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and they listed on 2 separate pages both the benefits of GMO and the concerns of GMO, which was great because then you could read through the benefits. Not only say pesticide resistance, but also salt tolerance, drought tolerance, disease resistance, and the like, increased yield, and all those kinds of benefits. And yet it seems like the anti-GMO platform has largely been on those GMO forms that encourage the use of pesticides. That is, say, Roundup-ready crops. And that's one of how many different GMO developments. So it's kind of hard to throw out put all of GMO into one basket. So when it comes to the idea of modifying mosquitoes, male mosquitoes, that won't bite you, so that they can't reproduce, and then you flood the population or flood an area with those sterilized male mosquitoes, and take mosquitoes essentially down to zero. So the aim would be eradication of mosquitoes from Hawaii. That's one of those things that it's hard to find a downside on, right? Because the females bite, the males don't. And so there's no chance that a GMO mosquito is going to bite you because they're all males and males don't bite. And then the other thing would be mosquitoes would be out of the picture. So not only would forest birds suddenly not have to deal with avian malaria and pox, but people could hike to Manawa Falls without getting eaten alive, right?
Yeah.
So that's a pretty amazing thing to me, in my mind. But it's going to take a huge public education effort to get people comfortable with the idea, because it's become this very easy stand or soapbox to jump on, to say that one is anti-GMO. I remember at the last Hawaii Conservation Congress, who was it? The big extinction guy. Was it Ehrlich? Or one of those? No, the first guy that came up with the idea of biodiversity.
From UH.
No, he's from a major university, but he was one of our plenary speakers. And we were having breakfast with him, and he says, do I dare bring up GMO? And I said, sure, you should. If anybody could get away with it, you would, right? Nobody's going to say you don't know what you're talking about or the like. And so even he was really careful. He came up and he talked about genetic modification and the like. And then at the very end, he had to say, but I also am not necessarily for any genetic modification that allows for abuse of pesticides. That's what he said at the very end.
A disclaimer.
Huh?
A disclaimer.
Yeah. And so but the crowd wasn't an unfriendly one anyway. But he still felt compelled to, because he recognized that the public sentiment in Hawaii is distinctly anti-GMO. So I love the idea of removing disease as a reason for extinction, because that's the main reason for extinction these days. As to the resurrection of extinct species using their DNA, I know that group is aiming to bring back the passenger pigeon as their first demonstration. And they have the genetics of lots and lots of specimens of passenger pigeons in the days when people would just blow them out of the sky for recreation. So they have a lot of DNA, and the closest relatives of passenger pigeons are known, and so all you have to do is insert that DNA into the egg of a close relative, put it into the nest, let the mother rear it. I said, all you have to do? Nobody's done that yet. But that's what they want to do. And if they're successful, that'll be a revolution. There's a Japanese team working on resurrecting the mammoth, right? Because they found frozen mammoths and their DNA is intact, and you could just use that in the egg of an elephant and get an elephant to give birth to a mammoth. So that Japanese team announced that intent 7 years ago. Still hasn't happened. So but you know, everybody's waiting. One of these days, we might see that. What was that?
I want them to be the pigeon guy.
I want them to be the fishing guy. Because, you know, after you have an elephant give birth to a woolly mammoth,
Hard to top.
that's hard to top that.
You guys made a pigeon?
Yeah, you guys, right. But as soon as they get the pigeon, we have DNA for O'o, for Mamo, for most of our extinct birds. It would be awesome. So you would have to get rid of mosquitoes and disease first, and have a forest system that's free of that threat. And then you could get the O'o back, and the Mamo back, and the Ohu back, and all the ones that, yeah. So I think the O'o project is a worthwhile project. I would like to see that.
Does EEV get lumped back into Japanese, or is it still Vestiaria?
Well, I call it Vestiaria. I'm going to call it Vestiaria until they come back to calling it Vestiaria. It works for plants, right?
Yeah.
When they change the name of plants, I just stick to the old name, and then within like 7 years, it's back to the old name.
You have another question.
Okay, so, no, it wasn't Sule. So here we go. The answer is KOKO, 9LP 96.3, only in Hanatown. Soon streaming at cocofmradio.com and on an app for your phone. Awesome. Thank you, Kaimana. Want to say something about the importance of ohia to native birds? Ohia lehua is the mainstay for Hawaiian honey creepers, and ROD, rapid ohia death, represents a huge threat to the future of Hawaiian birds. That's not to say that all Hawaiian forest birds are nectar feeders, but enough of them are that if ohia were to go down, it would be a very, very tough time for native birds. Yeah, that's looking to the future again, right? We need to deal with avian disease, and we need to make sure that ohia remains in our ecosystems. Thank you for that, Evelyn. Okay. Any other questions? Then mahalo again for being part of this. And look, it's not even 1 o'clock yet.
All right.
Yay. Thank you, gang.
That was good.
And thanks, folks on the phone. Before 1 o'clock comes, I want ideas for future webinars. What kinds of things can we pursue? People have mentioned things before, you know, like place names, plants and animals and place names, and exploration of that. That'd be kind of fun. It would take a little bit of research. You'd have to have a photo of the place. You'd have to have the plant and its name.
Well, I brought this up to you one time, but I
Yeah.
think waste management.
Oh, in ancient Hawaii.
Waste management in ancient Hawaii.
I don't know if that would take an hour.
But even, you know, all, not only human waste, but waste in general, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good to see you. Any other ideas? Waste management. I think when you mentioned that last time, I was telling you the story about the special sticks and rocks, right? So, someone asked, what did Hawaiians use for toilet paper? There wasn't any toilet paper. And instead, you would have a special rock that was long enough and about the right size for your rear end, and smooth-ended.
You making this up, or you?
No.
Oh, okay.
Smooth-ended with enough pores on it so that you could get all the stuff, right? And then you would wipe, and then afterwards you would wash it in the stream or whatever, and be able to use it again. Or a stick of similar
Well,
kind.
probably if you was near the ocean or river, you'd be in it. I don't know.
You could be. I don't know if you'd make doo-doo into the ocean, you know, while being in the ocean.
Well,
Yeah. I've read accounts where people claimed very strenuously that Hawaiians never crapped in the stream or in the ocean, that they would dig a hole, shallow hole, and do their thing and cover it over. The whole you know, that ahana kokolele, right? Means that they've caught you doing something bad, right? And that derives from a game in which kids would be running around doing the thing, and one of them would disappear. And everybody knew where that person disappeared to. They went off into the forest someplace to squat and do their thing, right? And so the game was on. You gotta find them. And if you find them and catch them in the act, kukailele, which is like your doodle is dropping, right? So like white lele is a waterfall, so kukailele is a shitfall. So that would be the ahana kukailele. And it turned into ahana kukalele or whatever, right, today. But that's what it's all about, was like catching your friend in the act of squatting and making doo-doo in the forest. So if you're doing that, I guess, you know, you would kick a little divot in the forest floor, do your thing, and then cover it over with moss or whatever you were going to do, or leaves. That would work.
Or rocks, if you're in a dry area.
Or rocks if you're in a dry area. It would be easy, like just take off 5 rocks, do your thing, put the 5 rocks back. We've all done that, those of us who've done field work. I don't know about so it was Joel Lau who told me about reading about the special sticks and stones that were used for.
So I guess.
And then their names, each of them gets a name, right? Because it's your close traveling companion. Right? They know you really well.
Yeah. But then what about like all the pigs? Because there's been pig farms and
so how would they deal with
all that?
Would they have been used in the fields for sweet potato, you know? You don't read about that. You always read about leaves or various other things being used as compost for that. So.
And I would fish farms too, right? Is the whole issue of waste.
Yeah, and I would assume they would know about, would have seen how it impacts your collar growth. The pigs get in when it's fallow and make all the dew, and then collar huge.
Bigger,
Or algae blooms down in your local because of all the pig.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But it's hard to find that in the traditional account. Yeah. So that's an interesting idea, but I don't know how easy it would be to actually gather up materials for it. Any other ideas? Ohia? I did one on Ohia already.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. I don't know if we can find, did we already put that up?
We just Google the natural world.
Didn't we do the significance of Ohia?
No, for another group you did.
Oh, so I didn't do it for this.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you did it for botany.
That's right, that's the botany group. Okay, so the next one will be on the cultural significance of Ohia, and that's good because ROD is a major kind.
Well, this one was forest birds, or just birds?
This one was forest birds, although it did have Lono in there because it did have the seabirds because I had to mention Lono.
What about water birds?
Water birds would be fun.
Well, you did mention all that.
Did I do water birds? So I could do water birds. I did one for the joint venture wetland folks, so I could pull that one up and see if I still believe what I told them.
What about rain?
Rain would be fun. Rains and winds. Okay, good. I gotta write these down. Okay, waste management, rains and winds, right? Rains and winds I can do even much more easily. File, open. Oh no, I'm not open. New. That's what I want. Get out of here. Okay. Escape. Okay, so rains, winds. Okay, waste management. Water birds. Am I not writing? Oh yeah, I'm writing. Okay. What else? Okay, cool. What else? Hohaku. Boy. You know, we're straying away from biodiversity here.
Well, no, you can incorporate that into biodiversity.
Pohaku is fun. Pohaku is,
What about fire?
what about
Is there
fire?
any type of fire management that is using fire?
Yeah, there was slash and burn agriculture. But once again, it would be hard to find
Yeah.
the enough detail on it.
Yeah. Something like that.
Now, what about, did you ever do anything on limu, the biodiversity of?
I did not, because I'm a terrestrial person. But limu would be a fun one. I'll let Eric Conklin or one of the marine team give that one. Oh, I know who. Koa Schultz. Kane Koa should do that, because he studied under Izzy. Oh, good. See, look, I get a day off. Okay.
Another one that was brought up before when you asked us was, food.
Food.
Yeah, the local diet of ancient times.
Wow.
We
Okay.
brought it up the last time we were all in here, but that was a good one. You mentioned we could all bring the mea'ai and have the potluck.
There you go. Good idea.
That is good one. We'd have to plan ahead for that, right? We'd have to plan ahead for that. But I like it. Food in ancient Hawaii. You know, and it would be fun to focus on wild foods, on foods that aren't Polynesian introductions, because the pickings are slim.
Yep.
And so just to talk about every single thing that you could eat in the forest, that'd be fun, actually.
What about salmon food? Like, I just saw that you had mentioned that cold.
Oh yeah, famine foods, including famine foods, okay? Including
Nori.
wild foods and famine foods.
Ape.
Oh,
Ape and
Grassy.
Ape.
All kinds of things. Hapu'u, ho'i'o. Yeah. There are all kinds of greens that could be steamed and eaten.
The ho'i'o is a native. The ho'i'o fern is a native.
There are the ho'i'o that are mostly you find in Chinatown. Those are all non-native. But if you go up into the mountains, there's a species of ho'i'o that.
Looks completely different.
Yeah, it does. Much more fragile and yeah. Yeah, well, including wild foods and famine foods.
Yeah.
You've done a talk on medicine.
I have not done a one on La'au.
And also the weaving, the different ways they're used.
The what?
The weaving of plants.
Oh, weaving. Okay. Weaving plants. Okay. Or plants, or
Plant parts, cause.
or just, yeah, weaving and cordage plants, right? There's a lot of that. Yeah, when you think about material culture, right? What would that be?
What about, kapu, seasonal kapu?
Yeah. The kapu system.
Or even, like lunar.
Oh yeah, you did mention that.
You read my mind.
The kapu system, the lunar calendar. That does. Are we in Akua right now?
I think we just left it.
Is it still waxing or is it waning? It's waning, right? So that makes it Mahialani or Kulu.
Yeah.
I wish Honolulu magazine would bring that back, because they used to have that in every issue, yeah?
Right.
The lunar calendar and what cycle it was,
Mhm.
every issue that came out.
In the Star Advertiser front page, just picture of the moon and.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have it in the science times section.
They do?
Lunar calendar, seasons.
Yeah, right by the lake.
Absolutely.
Did I do one on the Ahupua'a?
I thought it was recorded,
I didn't do one on the Ahupua'a, did I?
And the high, it was
The high low.
high low
Yeah.
on the
You
front,
touched
right?
on it
So it
in
goes up
your
there.
very
Yeah.
first one where you're
No, I
going
think
over natural resource
that was,
cultural.
Yeah.
bylaws.
that was
Yeah.
right? And let me see.
Okay, well, I'll put it down.
Watershed plan.
Yep, it's true. The Ahupua'a and other land divisions. And I mean, by land, I mean sea.
There's all kinds of stuff going on.
There's all kinds of things to talk
I
about.
was with you, you said for the year now, look at that.
Yeah, I've got a year's worth if I did every single one of those, which I won't.
Can you check the chat box to see if they have any discussion?
Okay, any suggestions from the peanut? God. Ahuyo, ahuyo.
That sounds like a good short half hour one.
Yes, I am sharing my desktop. That's okay, I have nothing to hide on my desktop. Impact of the Great Mahele on biodiversity, wow. All right.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, mahalo everyone.
Thanks.
We're gonna hang up on you now.